roughly 50 feet long and a half-inch across. The other was more isolated on the foliage in the area, but certainly most, and struck these individuals as being unusual enough to the point of stopping what they were doing, either driving or whatever, and collecting this material. Mind you, not being aware of this particular issue, just being struck by the unusual nature of this material. In one case, directly being seen come from the sky, in the other case, appearing after certain aircraft were noticed. So that's certainly one very unusual characteristic, is the size. Other characteristics would be extreme adhesiveness of this material and also a wavy nature to it at a microscopic level. It has all the appearances of being a synthetic material of some type. I then conducted my own analysis and test of this material, including that measurement, to the point where it appeared to me that this material was sufficiently unique to warrant further investigation. By the way, one of the suggestions for the identification of this material was that of spider webs. In my analysis, which became involved with really most types of fibers that I could locate, both natural and synthetic, spider webs were also considered in the analysis. The material appeared sufficiently unique to me, as well as discussing with Dave, that it warranted a more formal investigation than I can provide with any resources that I have.
Now, I want to just briefly deal with the contrail issue, because I'm going to show you something I can prove. A lot of you have seen these contrails in the sky recently. They're bizarre kinds of contrails. They're not like normal ones, that they stay in the sky. They don't dissipate like a normal contrail dissipates. So when you're on a clear sky, watch the aircraft as it goes over, and you will see this kind of a big bulbular contrail that just gets wider and wider, and then it covers the sky, and it includes the sun. And I became very concerned about these a while back. In fact, about 3 years ago, I was with Woody, and we noticed them in Erie. They were very, very bad at the time. And I am amazed today at how serious they are over the entire United States. And what you see here is how they form. Sometimes they'll do tic-tac-toes. There's all kinds of things. Now, the question is, where are they coming from? Is this a normal A1 fuel contrail, commercial fuel contrail? They form this kind of thin layer of clouds. Now, the reason I became concerned about this is I actually got in the mail, or in access to, this study by the Office of Scientific Affairs of the military. The Air Force showed that in 1995, they knew that JP-8 jet fuel was destroying the lungs and secondary organs. You'll see here the effects of chronic JP-8 jet fuel on the lungs and secondary organs. They knew then that it was inducing lung injury. 1995. How many fuel handlers do we have with JP-8 jet fuel? You're a fuel handler? Well, then you know what I'm talking about. If you have the loss of memory and the numb hands and the numb feet and all the problems that were starting to be reported to me. So fuel handlers started coming to me and saying, why do I have these problems? Why are we losing our memory? Why are we having this happen to us? And I did not know at the time. So then I actually got the information, and another study done by the Air Force in 95 that shows, done at the University of Arizona, that shows that it was destroying the immune system, affecting the immune systems of people that worked around it. What is this doing to people over civilian areas? Is this affecting us also? Well, lo and behold, I knew this study had been done. I knew the Air Force knew this since 1995, but we weren't hearing a word about it on the news media. The military wasn't hearing anything about it. They weren't being told to wear gloves or masks. And look what happens. Air Force Times came out. Toxic fuel. Is JP-8 getting under your skin? Why the Air Force is worried about exposure. I'll tell you why they're worried now, is because they didn't tell anybody in 1995 when they knew it. JP-8 is killing people now. In fact, the next article that came out after this, well, I'll show you the toxic fuel issue. And it says, this is from the Air Force Times. It was adopted with virtually no data about either emissions or possible health effects. And down here it says that it is destroying the immune system, the neurological system, and the respiratory system of people that work with it and around military bases. The next article that came out was this outcry. Air Force Times, with all the people that they felt had died as a result of the exposure to JP8. Now, is that what the contrail problem is? I don't know. But I've got a picture here of a contrail that you may want to pass around. And I'm going to show you a little bit more explicitly because you can actually see the exhaust is not coming out of the engines. It's coming out of a retrofitted area of the aircraft. And I'll pass this around, so please return it back to me when you finish with it. But I'll let you look at these pictures of the contrails. This is not some kind of conspiracy theory. We're talking about fact. We're talking about information that is absolute evidence, which is this study done by the Air Force in 1995. The Air Force now has a spraying squadron. In fact, the 910th out of Youngstown, Ohio, is a spraying unit. That is their primary mission. Now, why do they have a spraying squadron when we're 2,500 pilots shy in the Air Force? We can't even fulfill our regular missions, and we've got a spraying squadron? That spraying squadron, it's on our website, by the way, with the entire article about the 910th, in which they do commercial and civilian research and experimentation and spraying work. And that is a C-130 specially fitted with the wings to spray over Camp Lejeune. They were spraying for a bug that bit people. Now, a lot of the people are telling us that when they see this aircraft doing this certain type of spraying, it's white aircraft. And I had never believed that. I never thought they were white aircraft until I got this from the Travis Air Force Base, information from the Air Force. They're now using white aircraft. And you saw the one earlier on revolutionizing military affairs. It was all white aircraft in the Air Force.
Was presented to a professional laboratory with requests for identification, and unfortunately the results with that lab were less than sufficient. This laboratory came back with an initial verbal response that they, quote, thought it was spider webs, and this appeared completely inadequate to me as well as Dave, because number one, it was what an individual was thinking it was, and what I was after was an identification. This was a lab. An individual's thought pattern on what they thought it was really wasn't particularly relevant at the time. And so we pursued that a little bit further and allowed some more time for the lab, and while their testing was going on, I was continuing to conduct my own tests, especially chemically. And then from my side, basically being able to determine what it's not necessarily what it is, but what it's not by comparison to known quantities. Eventually, the word came back from that laboratory that this material was wool or silk fibers. Now, unfortunately, I had just completed a great deal of investigation on my side under the scope as well as chemically that demonstrated clearly and conclusively to me that these were certainly not wool or silk fibers in that case, is what he had said. Wool or silk, right? It simply didn't fit, and it wasn't even close. It's not a matter of being ambiguous. It wasn't even close to being a suitable explanation, and this was a letter signed by 2 PhDs. And at this point, Dave and I made the decision to visit this laboratory in person and confront them directly with their conclusions versus the research that I had done independently. At that point, there was a list of 9 methods that I had established, which clearly showed that their conclusions were false. And my goal was to go to this laboratory, present them with that information, and then basically get their response to allow for a possibility of possibly incomplete investigation, or for whatever reason. David and myself did indeed go to that laboratory and did confront the owner of that laboratory in person. And the short of the story is that I made it through number 2 out of 9 items, and this individual stated that our arrangement was terminated, that this arrangement no longer existed, was the net effect of that meeting, except unfortunately I only made it through number 2 out of number 9 in terms of the items which showed it. Those which were most conspicuous and obvious at the beginning were the size of the fibers, and visual analysis. Those are